I'm so excited. We have had some technical problems. We have audio problems, but good news. You can now hear and see us both. And today, welcome Dr. Bill West. Welcome, sir. I'm so glad to have you.
Thank you, Beth. I'm glad to be here and glad we fought through the technology.
Thank you for all that work. And so I know that, we're good. So, we're going to talk about your new book, which is a great, great topic. You've been a physician for decades now. You've been an oncologist specialist. You've been a lecturer. You're coming to us from Memphis, unless you're
From Memphis,
traveling.
Tennessee. That's right.
And so we're going to talk about the sacred science today and the creation and how so many people don't believe because of science. So let's talk about what caused you to write this book?
Well, the key thing, I think, was an article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about the rising proportion of nuns.
Yes, sir.
And I mean Nones. And if you look in that further, it was because they felt that science represented a better platform. So they're abandoning scripture. And I'll tell you my bottom line right now, science is a revelation of God. So they've gone from the scriptural revelation to a science revolution that they don't recognize as a revelation.
Wow. So you've been doing treatment and cancer care and immunotherapy. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. And I know this goes back to your wife having had breast cancer, but how have these two topics come together for you? Because you're usually either or, but you're both, and you're helping all of us become both. So what was the thing that brought you to this place from a scientific background?
Well, it was actually my mother. My mother had breast cancer, died when I was 21, just the day I graduated from college.
Oh.
And so I decided at that point I would, or rather from medical school, I would pick oncology as a specialty. And even way back then, I really had the feeling that the immune system would be the answer. We all have this wonderfully elaborate immune system God has given us that screens for cancer. And so right now I'm involved actually in a brand new treatment we're importing into Memphis, and it's being imported all across the country, that gives the patient's T cells a new way to see the cancer. So if you can imagine, every T cell in your body all of a sudden has the ability to see your cancer. It's actually, I think, going to be a big step forward, and brand new.
Yes, that is amazing. So, there's so many misconceptions about cancer treatments, what works, what doesn't. Talk about today, because you have kept up with the advancement in technology. You're a part of the advancement in technology. So if someone gets a diagnosis today, what's the big difference than 10 years ago?
I would say the biggest difference is that we can, and this is a fancy word, sequence. Look at the letters of the DNA, see what's broken, what are the mutations? And as we define a mutation, we try to find a drug that will block its activity. And so we've gone from broad poisons to much more specific, stop the impact of this particular mutated gene that's driving the behavior of this cancer cell. And when that works, it's just wonderful. It's much less toxic. It's much more effective. That's been the big area of research. And of course, now we're looking at trying to get every T cell in the body activated to go after the cancer. I think the next 10 years, I think I was born an oncologist 10 or 20 years too soon. I think we're going to see a lot of progress in the next decade.
So how do you get the T cell? You said if you could get the T cell basically to attack the cancer, how do you get the T cell to do that? Is that something you do, or is that something the patient does?
It's something big pharmacy does. We harvest the T cells using what's called an apheresis machine, and we ship them to a lab. They know what markers on the cancer cell, so they then give a new receptor, a new eye, a new way to see to the T cell. It's called a chimeric antigen receptor, CAR, drive your car. And then the T cell every T cell in your body, and potentially can see your cancer. And so the early reports of that are that it's going to be effective treatment for people who are just about exhausted all their treatment options, particularly multiple myeloma and a disease called lymphoma. And we're hoping that it'll continue to be developed for the more common cancers that are so difficult, pancreas and glioblastoma of the brain. But it's a brand new technology, and we've basically committed a team to do nothing else but bring it into Memphis. It's being brought into all the major medical centers around the country.
Wow, that's certainly encouraging. How long will that take? And you said less poisonous. I know sometimes people talk about the side effects of chemotherapy as well as radiation. This will be a less invasive treatment?
Well, it's just different. As you can imagine, if there's a significant amount of cancer in your body and all of a sudden you get infused a whole population of T cells that can see the cancer and don't like it, then you really can get a lot of flu-like symptoms, a lot of fever, a lot of reaction. It's obviously going to be better in patients with lower volume cancer, and just in terms of having less side effect. And what's going to be really interesting about it, it's going to be a new treatment for autoimmune disease, for when our B cells are misbehaving and attacking us, then we can kill that set of B cells and let a whole new family of B cells come in. That's the other type of cell that's active in autoimmune disorder. And by replacing those bad B cells with new ones, people who were at death's door with some of the autoimmune disorders you may have heard of, lupus, et cetera, go back to a normal life. So it's not just cancer. We're going to be, multiple specialties will be using this new approach to try to offer better treatments.
So is this an infusion? I know that you talk about stem cell therapy. How is this new treatment administered?
Well, we do something called apheresis. You get hooked up to a machine, and for an hour or two, we collect T cells. And then we ship those T cells to a special factory. And it takes about 2 weeks. They then give those T cells a new receptor, a new eye, a new way to see the cancer. We get them back, we reinfuse them. It's usually just a single treatment.
Wow.
And in about 5 days, you do get fever, et cetera. But then cancers that were otherwise resistant, and in particular, right now, the big difference is a disease called multiple myeloma and a disease called lymphoma, where there's no other option. The cure rate is very high. So we're really excited about that, and we want to see it improved and developed for other forms of cancer.
So what does T cell have to do with stem cell?
Well, the stem cell is the mother cell that makes all other blood cells. And so the stem cell can make the white blood cell that fights infection. It can make a T cell. It can make a B cell that makes antibodies. And of course, when you have a transplant, a bone marrow transplant, you may get your own stem cells back so that you could receive a higher dose of chemotherapy, or you may get stem cells from a relative or someone who's been matched. But those stem cells then go on to build a whole new system in your bone marrow. We hope that this new T cell technique actually will work just as well and not be as difficult, as expensive, take as long, and so forth.
So for people who are dealing with cancer today, to benefit from some of these new technologies and some of these new treatments, what's the best route to find the best treatment? I know you're an oncologist, so you sit down with your patients and things like that, but not everybody has access to the latest and greatest treatment. Is that correct?
Well, that's unfortunately true. But generally speaking, most oncologists are very quick to recommend a second opinion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here in Memphis, people can go to Texas, they can go to Nashville, our main competitor, and have a discussion about other options and whether one option is superior to the other. It's a big ethic in our field, and that is to share patients, share opinions, and give patients the opportunity to explore different treatments.
Yeah. Well, so on a me level, like I'm not a doctor, I'm not an oncologist, I have no medical background. What does this mean to the general population as we move forward in technology, information? I mean, what does this breakthrough mean for us as we go forward? Does it mean quicker healing? Does it mean just a better treatment? I mean, what's the overall arching theme that you're most excited about?
Well, the gold standard is complete remission, making
Yes.
disease completely disappear and seeing a patient go back to normal life.
Yeah.
You know, these treatments usually begin in our universities. And so they're restricted, let's say, to a Vanderbilt or to a St. Louis University. 70% of our cancer care is delivered by community oncologists. So then we transfer technology. I am that. I am a community oncologist. And, we have a cancer center here with 700 employees, but we're constantly searching for new treatments. Constantly, we have many meetings every year where we discuss new treatment options. And we try, when one looks promising, we try to bring it in as quickly as we can. And that's generally true. The community oncologists in this country are really the mainstay of delivering cancer care. And it's their job to stay up, to be aware, and to know what's happening, what's developing.
Yeah. So you mentioned a word earlier I want to go back to, which was big pharma. People have become so afraid of what they don't understand. And I think oftentimes, things have become so informationally driven that we can pull on the website, we can make ourselves crazy with what we ought to do. What do you think that people need to know about real options, real treatment, and faith, where that comes in? Because we've covered the science, and so the faith of that. You even said, so many people are not believing in anything. They're nuns. How does all of this begin to transfer into being able to have treatment, science, but also have sacred faith?
Well, they're two of the most important topics in our lives. I've spent the last few years actually spending more time on the sacred science, the title of my book.
Mm-hmm.
The nuns are leaving the church, the great de-churching, because they want to go to science. And the irony there is science is a fabulous revelation of God.
Mm-hmm.
And even I didn't realize that. I've been in science all my life, but I decided when realized this thing was happening, this phenomenon, I went back to review. Well, what is the science of creation? What was step one? What was step two? What was step three? And you see this super intelligence behind every step. And it's just a shame for people to stumble into science and not really be thoughtful about the fact, where did this come from? It didn't just pop out of the sky. I often use as an example the first 20 minutes of creation. In the first 20 minutes, God created the fuel for 5 billion trillion stars. Our sun is burning 600 billion pounds of that fuel every second. And that sun was created, that fuel, in the first quarter hour of creation. So this vast fuel supply was created that makes our sunshine, that allows life. And to me, that's just so religiously affirming that plan was so beautifully, super intelligently implemented at the moment of creation. We're given the fuel for the stars in the first 15 minutes.
I lost you there. Hold on, you're
If
coming
you
back. This technology. I think your internet is, maybe move around a minute if you can still hear me,
I hear you.
because it's twirling. There we go. He's back. Woo!
I hear you.
We're having some technology. So you were talking about the amazing creation and what God did and the power that is in our creation. And I love that part of the sacred part of the science, because I think take Christian out of it. We do not understand the power of the creation as it is. Do you agree with that? I mean, that's part of what you're seeing as the
Well,
nuns.
I totally agree with that. And I will now tell you the story of the first third of the book. It outlines 8 blueprints, each of which had to come together to create this universe. And I use as an example, and I worry sometimes I use too many scientific terms, but the Higgs field. I don't know whether you're familiar with the Higgs field, whether you've heard that term.
I've heard it.
Our atoms have to swim through the Higgs field where they are given mass. And without the Higgs field, we would not be physical. We wouldn't have planets, we wouldn't have people. And how was the Higgs field discovered? Peter Higgs looks at an equation on a piece of paper, and he says, if that existed, if that field was real, it would explain this deep mystery of
Having
mass.
a dip again. Move around again, if you hear me.
Is it my Wi-Fi that's misbehaving? Let's see. I'm seeing a good signal on my end. I don't.
Come on, technical.
Can you hear me?
There we are.
We're back.
We're back. We're just having us some trouble, aren't we?
No, I'm so sorry.
No, it's
let me
okay.
finish that. Let me finish that story of the Higgs equation.
Yes.
So this great discovery is made by Peter Higgs looking at an equation on a piece of paper. And so then my question is, where does that equation spend eternity? And that takes us back to the idea that God has a library, a mathematical landscape in a higher dimension from which he chose those items to be released at the moment of creation. And the Higgs field was critical. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Higgs field. It made us physical. It made the components of the atom physical. Otherwise, we'd be in a big light show. We wouldn't know anything about it. But because of the Higgs mechanism, and the idea that that was discovered by looking at an equation, and then again, I'm going to ask the question again, where does that equation spend eternity? And that takes us all the way back to Plato, I mean, way back to fundamental concepts of higher dimensions with ideal forms, which Plato is referring to God in the ideal forms to his tools of creation. And that's what's really fun. If anybody wants to have a good time, is just to look at the tools of creation as they happened and what they accomplished.
That is incredible. So many people don't understand the power of creation, God, the whole thing. So, and from a sacred standpoint, And the nuns, what do you wish to reach them with? The blend of the science that confirms the sacred?
Well, my basic message is science is a revelation of God.
Yes.
These things
Amen.
just didn't happen. The
Right.
Higgs field just didn't discover itself.
Mm-hmm.
These things were planned in succession. These blueprints that built this universe, they work together in perfect harmony. If one of them was missing, we wouldn't be here. Take a simple one I think most people have heard of, E equals mc squared. When the light erupts at the moment of creation, those light particles hit each other and spit out something that's destined to become an atom, a material object. We became all too familiar with that equation, by the way, when we developed the atom bomb, because it runs in the opposite direction. But without that E equals mc squared as an idea of one of the eight, we wouldn't be here. And
that's
excuse me.
No, that. Go ahead, finish that thought, and then I'm going to ask you a different question.
I'm done. You go ahead.
So, in the world of, because we have technology, do you think that has created a part of the nuns is because people don't search their soul anymore, they search the internet?
I think that's very, very interesting. I'm much older than a teenager, but yes, there's a lot of things to do today online that don't necessarily allow you to. Even I had to go back, and I've been in the science field all my life, and really had to dig to see what are these nuns talking about. What is it about science? And then I realized if you take each step of creation as defined by science, it's sacred. It's the handiwork of God. And we have scripture as revelation, and we have science as revelation. And it pains me to think that young people might look at that science as unrelated and not realize that it's all a gift of a super intelligent mind, step by step, bringing his universe to being, and then bringing life to being.
Yes.
I mean, DNA is such a wonder. I was really proud of Bill Gates at Microsoft, who said there's no way we could accomplish anything with that type of information density. Yeah. Where did it come from? We don't know.
No. So you also said something a while back about our incredible bodies, just the actual creation of it itself, the body, the human body. You've studied it, you know about it. Is there lifestyles? Is there anything that we can do to reduce our chance of getting a diagnosis, perhaps of cancer or an autoimmune disease? Is there something we as people can do to protect our health from a realistic, everyday standpoint?
It's kind of stunning that after World War II, we gave all our soldiers cigarettes. Yeah. And in my early career practicing, lung cancer was just so predominant. People stopped smoking. It's much less common today. The rate of lung cancer, thank God, is falling. So there's one thing you can avoid, and you can avoid easily. I wish there were other items we could do that obvious to reduce our risk of cancer, but that's the one, of course, that leaps to the fore, and that is don't smoke, don't chew, avoid the carcinogens in tobacco.
Yeah. But also exercise, maintaining a healthy body weight, are all those helpful?
I think there are. There's been a lot of study that suggests that obesity raises your risk of cancer. And so, yes, I think avoiding obesity is an important thing to do. Some cancers are going to happen to the healthiest of us. It's not something we can absolutely prevent, in which case then we should talk about early diagnosis and screening. Mammography was invented the year my mother died with breast cancer. So women should get regular mammograms. Sometimes that involves ultrasound and MRIs. But find things early. Early detection is always so important in the successful treatment of a cancer.
And what do you say to the people that say it's more dangerous to get a mammogram because of the radiation than not? Because you hear a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of experts out there, and you're a true expert. You're a medical doctor, you're an oncologist, you've been at the top universities in our nation. How important are those screenings, and are they dangerous? Because people are scared of everything now.
Well, I think the benefit vastly outweighs the risk. We even have a screen now for lung cancer. You know, a quick CAT scan, a very low amount of radiation, and heavy smokers should consider getting one of those every year. You know, it's $100 test, and you can pick up a lung cancer when it's, you know, a tiny thing and readily curable. So, no, I'm a big advocate of screening, even when it involves, and we try to minimize the dose of radiation as best we can.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think it is important, the early detection. And so going back to creation and talk about the book, how important is, this is one of my things, is outside is my happy place. Is there importance for us lifestyle wise to get outside, to be in creation, to be amongst God's creation, the trees, the plants, all that? I mean, mentally, that really works for me. Is there a physical benefit of all that? Because it seems like there has to
be. You have to get some vitamin D, and
Yeah.
you know, sunshine is necessary for that.
Right.
You know, I have 2 dogs outside that I just love dearly. Now that I love my 8 grandchildren, but they, you know, they've grown up. They're growing up, and I've got my 2 little puppy dogs, and they're such company, and it's wonderful to interact with creatures of that sort. And
yes, it is.
And in the great outdoors, you know, we have the Mississippi River here. That's our main natural attraction. But
yeah, well, I'm in Louisiana. We've got the big old Mississippi River Bridge and all that. So if people want to learn more about the sacred and the science, let's say maybe you want to learn how all this affects your faith, if it affects your faith, what are people going to read when they get your Sacred Science Understanding Creation book?
Well, it's divided into 3 sections. The first section are the 8 blueprints that created the universe and how they interacted with each other, what impact they had. I put so much emphasis in the fact that the Higgs equation brought such an important discovery. Where does that equation live? It suggests clearly to me that there's a higher dimension with a library, which then brings us to life. Because if there's a library of math, there's also a library of genes and proteins. And that actually has been described in an excellent book called Arrival of the Fittest about 4 years ago. And you can see in that system how God set up a library of genetic sequences, and life could travel that library and gradually advance toward a creature that God could create in his image. And that's a little outstanding, amazing to me. We are created in the image of God, which means we can understand that science, we can have this conversation. And I just think that's probably the most wonderful thought possible.
Well, it is the most wonderful thought. And I think if we lived like we knew that, we would live differently. Do you agree?
I suspect you are right.
Yes. And, you know, that goes back to, if God created us in the image of God, then he has a purpose for us. He has a plan for us. He wants to lead us and guide us into the best life he has for us, which is, you know, we've talked a lot about physical health. That's the mental health component of it. If you feel like your life matters, then you live like your life matters. Do you agree with that?
Of course I do. Purpose is just so important, and to have meaning. In the image of God means we're spiritually hungry, and it means we need meaning. We need purpose. And that's the great dechurching pain to me, you know, is being I've been in the same Sunday school class for 55 years, and we watched our kids grow up together. And that's just been so reinforcing to have that. I was taken to church by my mother when I was a little bitty baby, and I think that's an important gift to give to children. I've got a book behind me that is called Portraits of Christ in Genesis. I don't know whether you've ever heard of it, but it was my mother's favorite book. When she had breast cancer and knew she was going to die with it, it was her great comfort because it talks about all of Genesis pointing the way toward Jesus. The ark, get on board the ark and you'll be safe from the surrounding sea of sin. I mean, obviously a prototype of Jesus. So I think introducing children to religion is just so important. And it hurts me to think that perhaps that's not happening to the degree it ought to. Yeah, we lost it again.
We had a little moment. There we are. Well, we're having our technical problems today, but so we'll just close on this. I think, in reference to the nuns, which was a driving interest of yours. I think we have to balance the science with the sacred. You can't put the science over the sacred. And I think that in the information world, AI and all of that, it's so easy to get information that we lose the importance of the sacred. So you're blending those two together, correct?
That's, such an important point. And people say, well, don't we just have a giant AI supercomputer? And I say, well, do you think a supercomputer would pick a chosen people? Do you think it would inspire messianic dreams? Do you think it would inspire somebody to go up against one of the toughest empires in the history of mankind and against the temple priesthood? I don't think so. So I don't know what's going to happen with AI. Hopefully it'll improve all of our lives, but it's not going to replace the fundamentals.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's not going to take place of relationships.
No.
People still need to be in relationship with one another and relationship with God, which is the critical foundation relationship of our life. There's Dr. West. He's back. So we'll close.
Sorry, Beth, I don't hear you. I'm sorry.
How about that one?
I got that one.
Okay, there's the bet that works. So, bottom line is, if you have questions about the sacred, or if you have questions about the science, get the book Sacred Science, which is available on Amazon. It answers the questions from a perspective, or if you've had questions about treatment of someone that you know or love. Dr. West has been doing this. He's been a medical doctor and oncologist at Harvard and the top medical study in the world, and has his own oncology clinic, West Oncology Treatment Center in Memphis, Tennessee. So you know your stuff and you've written about it. So the rest of us can learn from all of the years of what you've been compiling in your brain. And it's a great opportunity for a book to answer some of the questions that people have.
I think so. And I failed to mention the third section of the book gets into the relationship of mind and brain and the fact that we have a soul, and that soul is eternal.
Yes.
And I'm a big student of the near-death experience, and so that's covered in detail. And the impact of psilocybin, breaking down the barriers and allowing more and more people. 6 out of 10 atheists treated with psilocybin drop the atheist label because they encounter this cosmic mind, which we would call the Holy Spirit.
Now,
So
what
it's
was
a
that
wonderful-
word you said?
Psilocybin?
Oh, yes, that word.
Magic mushroom.
Magic mushroom.
But it's coming back into healthcare. A lot of work at Johns Hopkins, and I think it's going to play an important role in certain mental problems.
I've heard a lot about mushrooms these last 4 or 5 years, which is so bizarre, but good. That's really good. So the third part is about that relationship and eternal, the soul, the brain, and all that. So
Correct.
good.
The middle is about life's journey.
Yeah.
The first is about the blueprints that created the universe, and the final, the fact that we have a soul.
Yeah.
And
it is eternal.
That is eternal.
Well, Dr. West, thank you so much for seeing us through all of our technical problems. We had some audio problems, we had some internet problems, but hey, I think we got most of it covered, and we'll maybe come back around and talk on some of those again at a time later when we can not have interruptions of internet things.
Well, you are a patient human being. I hope it. I don't know what caused it. I'm going to do a diagnostic search.
Yes,
but
I don't know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day, and it was wonderful talking to you. And thank you for sharing your incredible years of work with the world.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.